Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and Brad Garlinghouse and Stuart Alderati have been at Masari Mainnet, and we don't have any video yet, but here's the first. There's a couple of quotes that they put out. Brad Garlinghouse comes out swinging. Everything the SEC cares about, they lost. A freight train was driven through Gensler's arguments that these are all securities. And then Stuart Alderati says, when you walk into the SEC building, they're not your friend, and it's not a church. You don't have to bow down. Two great quotes right out of the gate. And then here's one from Circle's Jeremy Allaire. There's an absolute assault on passing comprehensive stable coin regulation by the banking industry. And then we've got this. There's Ripple's logo there in the background. You'll see right there. And this is Kristen Smith from the Blockchain Association. Here's a little clip from her. She talks Ripple too.
What's your thought on the recent SEC court losses? I mean, you'll be talking about this on the main stage today. And what are your thoughts on the Coinbase case?
Yeah, and I'm really excited. I'm going to be sitting down here at Mainnet today with Paul Grewal, who is the Chief Legal Officer of Coinbase. But, you know, it's very interesting because as Congress is working through this legislative gap, filling the legislative gap, we've seen regulatory agencies try to test the limits of the law by using a regulation by enforcement approach. And so they're doing these cases. And what we've seen is, particularly over the summer, Ripple, whose booth is right behind us here, they scored a major win in that XRP is not deemed to be a security. And so we're finding that we're not able to get clarity with the regulatory agencies, but we are able to get some clarity through the courts. And so we're hoping that as the Coinbase case moves through, we'll continue to get additional clarity, which will allow time for Congress to figure out the appropriate framework and get that enacted into.
Okay, then we had, now the Coinbase case is very relevant. I'm having trouble uploading the video, but I recorded John Deaton. He did a Spaces with Link2, who is one of my sponsors. But he did a Spaces with Link2. I can't get this thing uploaded, but I can still play it for you. Listen to this. John Deaton is describing that if this happens, you could see a Ripple settlement forced on the SEC, and you could see the entire crypto industry move forward. Listen to this.
But this Coinbase motion to dismiss the part of the case where the exchange is selling these tokens, if Judge Failure, who just dismissed, the Uniswap case, if she adopts Torres's ruling, what's been called the Torres Doctrine, and if she says that when you're engaging in a blind bid-ask transaction where the parties don't know each other, the counterparties have no idea who there is, that those tokens are simply an asset sell. They are not an unregistered security. Howey doesn't apply, sort of like Judge Torres' reasoning, that third factor. You can't rely on the efforts of the seller if you don't know who the seller is. If she decides as a matter of law that Howey doesn't apply to that type of transaction, Coinbase, she could dismiss that part of the Coinbase case. She might say that the staking, Coinbase giving, the staking program where you're earning something by staking it, that is a grayer area. So she could give a split decision, but that would be massive, because then in order to do an appeal, all right, they would have to go to the Solicitor General and get authority to appeal that decision. And they're never going to do that because it could reach the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court then invokes the Major Questions Doctrine and says that the SEC doesn't have jurisdiction on any of these cases. And then the Supreme Court could give other language that affects the EPA, the FDA, the CFTC, and every other federal agency. And that is so risky for an administration to risk an appeal on a conservative.
Well, it's so risky for an administration that has no faithful allegiance to the law. It's very risky for an administration that views its citizens now as victims to go after instead of to work with to try to bring innovation to the United States. I mean,
Supreme Court and appellate court that is chomping at the bits.
An administration who acts more like a Gestapo than like we're living in a free country.
Lower or the authority of these federal agencies and the expansion of their authority. And so if that happens and Coinbase wins that motion to dismiss, then the SEC will be forced to pivot. And that's when they come to the table, and then we get some level of clarity, and hopefully this technology starts advancing in the United States.
All right. Then we've got Michael Saylor, who still lives in La La Land. Here, this clip's great from Wheezy, because Michael Saylor is telling you, without telling you, that he's got the opinions of all these people in government. Now, if we've learned anything about the people in government, you can't trust any of them. But Michael Saylor does. He's giving you a laundry list of all of these government liars who have issued an opinion that Bitcoin is a commodity. And he trusts them all. Not this digital asset investor, but he's telling you that all Bitcoin has is the opinions of a bunch of people that lie for a living.
So what you have is a question, is Bitcoin a commodity or not? That has been resolved over the past 24 months via the endorsement of two heads of the SEC, Jay Clayton and Gary Gensler, the head of the CFTC, Rostin Benham. It has been underscored by speeches by the head of the EU Central Bank, the head of the U.S. Central Bank, the head of the Treasury, Janet Yellen. It's been implied, if not stated, in statements by the White House. It has been endorsed by leading Republican candidates like Ron DeSantis and leading Democratic candidates like Robert Kennedy. It has been endorsed and underscored by senators like Cynthia Lummis and Ted Cruz, and by Congress people like Tom Emmer.
Legal.
Right? Like Patrick McHenry.
The only reason he's going through that is because he knows it's not legal, folks. Now, something I ran across today I wanted to show you. This is a guy that was at Ripple Swell, Derek Walton, Bank of America, head of GTS Emerging Payments and Innovation. These guys very rarely do any interviews, and I found this one, and I wanted you to see part of it.
FinTech Futures at Cybos, and I'm joined by Derek Walton of Bank of America. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very well. Are you enjoying the conference so far?
I am enjoying the conference. It is a whirlwind and a marathon, but yes, I'm enjoying it.
Excellent, excellent. Well, maybe to get started, then let's give a quick introduction to yourself and your role in the bank.
Yeah, I look after emerging payments and innovation for GTS at Bank of America. I've been doing it now for 3.5 years, based out of New York, and really enjoying the role.
Excellent, excellent. So, I wanted to take a look at cross-border payments then. How has that space evolved in recent years with digitization and more people trying to move money across the borders?
Yeah, I feel like that's such a hot topic, cross-border payments. We've really been doing cross-border payments the same way for decades. And it hasn't really been until recent that we really started changing or checking the way in which we do this. And there's a lot of different ways. I think that notably everyone's usually, especially since we're at Cybos, Swift is a big part of how we do it. But we're starting to get a little bit of demand in the market. And because of that, we're starting to see a lot more innovation that really relates to sending it faster, allowing it to be more transparent, to do it cheaper, as we're up against other fintechs and other parties out there who are able to do it a little cheaper. We have to account for all that. And not to mention, there's other new players in the field, such as cryptocurrencies and stablecoins. So the idea of utilizing some of this new innovation, these new technologies in the market is pretty important.
Excellent, excellent. How has Bank of America then adapted to these changes and been looking to get in on that?
Well, I would say we use basically we're looking at everything. And I would say basically circle all of the above. We are still very much utilizing some of the SWIFT methodologies. It's the biggest network in the world, huge members, and it's the way that most of our clients and most of our team knows. But it doesn't mean that there's not always right for looking at data in a very different way. So as we start looking at SWIFT and we start bringing it out, we say to ourselves, well, we've been using SWIFT for large payments from a cross-border perspective. Maybe we should start looking at some other rails and other ways in which we do it. So one is when we look at SWIFT from a business-to-business payment perspective, it is as solid as it can be. I think once we start looking at business-to-consumer payments, that might be a different avenue in which we start approaching things.
All right. Well, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe. Hit the like button. Tell your friends and family that John Deaton has told you what the road to settlement looks like. Thanks for listening.